In this video, I'll be talking about why your 240 has disappeared. So we get phone calls all times of day and night when people are phoning up and saying, I've got no 240. And they normally know that because their TV stopped working, their phone won't charge, even worse, they can't make a cup of tea. So what's going on? Well, there's a few different things it can be, and I'll go through them individually. There's three distinct areas that can cause this fault. So the first one is a faulty RCD or MCB, which I'll talk about in a second. They're the things that actually allow the power into the caravan once it's come from the site into the van, and then it goes through the RCD and MCBs. I'll talk about those in a sec, like I said. You can have a faulty RCD and MCB. You can have a fault in one of the appliances actually in the caravan, or even an appliance that you're plugging in to one of the sockets around the van, or you can have overloaded it. So in a second, we'll have a look at the control unit of the RCD and the MCBs, and I'll show you how to test which one of these things it actually is. When I get a phone call, I will say to the customer, can you go to where the trip switches are? Now this is what I am talking about. This is the, in the Swift, this is the EC400 unit. It's normally under the bed in the newer Swift, sometimes it's up in the cupboard. But depending on what manufacturer you'll see, this is a Sergeant version, Bailey do BCA, and so do Coachman, which I'll show you a picture of now. They will be under a bunk somewhere, or they'll be hidden away under a cupboard, somewhere like that. But it's normally fairly close to where the inlet of the caravan power is. So you can see in the corner there, you can see the orange cable that's coming in, and then it's going into this system here. So it's got to be within a certain distance of where that's plugged in. And sometimes we have to play hunt the RCDs. You just never know where it is. But if you know where that is, and it's around about that place somewhere there. But then once I've said to the customer, right, find it, then they'll find it. The first thing we can test for, and the most common thing, is that it's been tripped out by overloading the system. Now what can happen there is that the system can only take a certain amount of amps. And if you plug something in that's too high a wattage, say for instance the most common culprit is the kettle, if you go over 2 kilowatts, 2 kilowatts is 8.75 amps, then you've got all the rest of the system on. Maybe you have the heater on the water heater, so if you times that by 2, because that's kind of where the amps are for the water heaters and everything, then you're talking over 16 amps. So if you plug a kettle in and then you plug your fridge is running and your water heater's going, the trip on the park is normally 16 amps. So you can do the maths, and quite quickly, if you plug in a decent sized kettle, then you're going to be over those amps and it can trip out. It also depends on who else is using the system, what time of day it is. So at 8 o'clock and everyone's putting a kettle on, it's more likely to do it. There's technical reasons for that, which to be completely honest go a bit over my head. And if you're an electrician, you can probably put in the comments why that is. But it seems to be that the further away the cable is, the more likely it is it's going to trip. So if you're on the end of 25 meters, it's a bit more likely than if you're on the end of 10-meter cable, and that's to do with resistance or something. That's the most common issue as to why that goes. And like I say, it could be time of day. Also, there's variants that have been kind of built into these things. So it's a 16 amp trip, but it might be 14, it might be 17. It's not an exact science, I don't think. And so that could be another reason why it goes. To test for it, the first thing I say is go to your trip switch, make sure it goes donk, and that's what I say. And the reason for that is because when you press that test button, it goes donk like that. Okay, so when it does that, that means there's 240 getting to the system. If the site had tripped out, that would not do that. Okay, it wouldn't go donk. It would just go, you press that button and nothing had happened at all. It would just stay there. That's a good indication that there's no power getting actually into the caravan. So most people think that the first thing that's gone wrong is there's a problem with the caravan. So they start looking around and thinking it's actually, the system's gone wrong in the caravan, but 9 times out of 10 it's not. It's been tripped out on the park. It might not be by you. The whole box might have been tripped out by someone with a faulty appliance, so it might be no fault of your own. Then you can go to the box on the site, and if it might have a manual trip that you can trip up yourself, or you might have to call a warden to do that for you. But in any case, the first thing to do is press that button and see if it goes donk. If it doesn't, you haven't got power physically get into the caravan. The next thing to do is, like I said, go to the trip box, see if you can reinstate that. then come back here, see if that goes donk. If it does, then obviously you've got power, and then that 9 times out of 10, that's problem solved. And then you can carry on with your holiday. And that's generally what happens when people phone me up, and then I don't hear from them again. The second problem that we see more often, well, no, sorry, not as often, is that there's a fault in an appliance in the Caravan itself. Now, this will give you a different set of problems. Now, if you go to that first problem and all these trip switches are in the up position, sorry, then it hasn't done anything bad in the Caravan, so nothing's tripped out. It is the site. If you haven't got 240 and then you go to the trip switches and one of these MCBs is down, which is miniature circuit device, and then you've got a RCD, which is residual current device. If one of those is down, say the MCB is down like that, then there's a fault on that particular circuit line. It might be in conjunction with that one being down as well, okay, because that means it's something has happened to an appliance and then it's tripped it out here. More than likely, it would have probably tripped it out on the park as well, because if you've got a dead short, then it's going to probably trip everyone out. And if you're really unlucky, it trips everyone else out and you get horrible looks on the site. At 10 o'clock at night when everyone else can't use their 240. This is a slightly different problem, and it's a slightly bigger problem, and the way to find it out is to kind of do a little bit of sleuthing. So what you need to do is reinstate the Park 240 to make sure you've got it there, and then turn off all your appliances. Turn off your fridge, turn off your water heater, unplug everything, make sure nothing's plugged in, space heater, water heater, fridge, even your charger. There'll be a charger switch that you can turn off. On here it's that one there, but there will be a charger switch because that can be a fault as well. Anything 240, turn it off. And then when you've done that, you can reinstate the 240 system by making sure that the 240 is on the site. And of course you can do that by pressing the button and seeing it goes donk, and that means you know you've got it here. Then if you reinstate the MCBs, turn them all up. Now this is when another problem can arise. If one of those MCBs won't go up and you know you've got all the appliances off, there could be a fault in the wiring, but not very often. Normally it will be the MCB that is at fault itself. Now you can have a faulty MCB or RCD, so whatever you do, it's not going to work. So if it physically won't push up when there's no 240 present, so what you can do is you can take the 240 out, and then if this won't physically go back up again, if it keeps falling down, then there's a problem with the MCB there, and you just have to replace it. There's not much you can do with that. Same with that one. Sometimes it will go up and it won't stay up, and again there's a physical problem with that and you can't do anything with it. You just have to replace it. But if you're trying to decide which appliance is faulty, now with this one we have 3 lines. You've got a 16 amp line and 2 10 amp lines as well. Most of the time you'll have 2 on older vans. You'll have a 10 amp circuit and you'll have a 6 amp circuit. Now the 10 amp circuit does all the heavy lifting, so that's what your water heater's on. Also your plug socket next to your kitchen area will be on that 10 amp, because that's where you plug in your kettles, and people use toasters and all sorts of things there. So that's where that's on the 10 amp line. Everything else lightweight will be on the 6 amp. Again, this one's been uprated, so you've got a 16 amp and you've got a 10 amp circuits, because we're using more appliances than in the old Caravans. With the old Caravans you'll probably just see the 2. But again, on the 16 amp line you'll have the heavier stuff. So you have the fridge, you have the water heater and the space heater, because there's a combi in here. So that's a good indication of where the heavier stuff's going to be. If you reinstate the systems, turn back on again, then it's just a case of kind of working out which thing's tripping it out. Then what you do is turn your fridge on and see what happens. If it stays on and everything's working, it's obviously not that. Of course, if the MCB trips out and everything goes, then it's your fridge. And the most likely thing on that is going to be your element. It's the same as a kettle element, so you've got an element on the back of the fridge, an element in the water heater. They're all based on elements, and if one of those starts to fail or completely goes to earth, that creates a short circuit, and that's what's tripping this out. If you turn your fridge on and then it goes clonk, and then you know what it is. Likewise, then what I tend to advise is, okay, it's not that, turn your fridge off and then turn your water heater and your space heater on and do the same thing. Right, it's not that, nothing's happened. Then your charger, it can be a fault in the charger. And if it's none of those, then look to your appliances themselves. If you had a fault in the actual kettle, then that will do the same thing. So if you plugged your kettle in and the whole thing goes off, that's what it is. So you've kind of got to do a little bit of sleuthing, and it's just a process of elimination really, is to work out exactly which appliance it is. And then of course If it is one of the appliances, if you're on holiday, then obviously don't use it, but you can use it on gas if you're, if you're cold, or if you want your hot water so it doesn't spoil your holiday, you can carry on using it on gas to get you going. That isn't as common as tripping the caravan out by plugging your kettle in, but it can happen, and that's the way to kind of find out which one it is. Like I said, it can be a charger, can be your water heater or space heater, can be your fridge. It can be the wiring, but not very often. You just have to work it out on a process of elimination. Well, that's the three things it can be. So you've got overloading, you've got a physical problem with your RCD or your MCBs, and then you've got a physical problem with one of the appliances in the caravan, or don't forget something you've plugged in. Now you can have that rogue charger that you bought from China and you plug it in, it trips everything out. Could be one of those. So just a note on the overloading side of things. We do have people coming in buying low kilowatt kettles, which are great, but the problem is you've got to get up at 7 o'clock to make a cup of tea for 9. They're not the quickest things in the world. You can use something up to 2 kilowatts. So as long as you don't bring that 3 kilowatt super duper quick boil thing from home and plug it in, that's just going to trip it out. As long as you look at the bottom of it, because it will say on the bottom what the wattage is, as long as it goes to 2 kilowatts, or obviously 2000 watts, and then that won't trip everything out in one go, providing you kind of manage it. So just make sure you haven't got your heating blasting away at full whack, and you've got your water heater on, and someone's using some straighteners in the other room or anything like that. You just got to manage it a little bit, and as long as everything stays under 2 kilowatt, then you can use that particular appliance probably in one go without everything else on, and you'll be fine. So that's the three things, like I said: overloading, physical problem with the RCDs, and then tripping out a problem with your one of the appliances in here. So hopefully with those three things covered and how to actually work out which ones they are, that will save you having to go home. We've had people go home when they've lost their 240, and it could have been a simple thing to fix, or trying to work out what it is by phoning the dealer or Googling it. So hopefully that would get you back on your holidays.